But this time it's my pleasure to introduce Ashley Davidson to do the induction of Ted Bishop. Ashley?
So who is Ted Bishop? Over the past month, I've prepared for what I would say today, and there are a couple things that make tonight pretty difficult. The first is that my sister did my dad's nomination speech at the PGA annual meeting, and I've had to forever hear about it, how great it was, and so supposedly tonight is my big chance. And I really don't know what it is about being the oldest and constantly being compared to your younger sister with her golf game or her speeches, but it does seem to happen to me. Secondly, this guy is not only my father, but my boss. So if this doesn't go really great, I may end up with no job, no school bus driver because he takes my son to school in the mornings, and without one of my best friends. So here goes. I recently Googled Ted Bishop, and I know who the real Ted Bishop is, but I wanted to know how others might describe him. The first thing I came upon was Stanley Eugene Ted Bishop, who is an amateur golfer. He was born in Massachusetts. He won several amateur tournaments, and his biggest win was in 1946 when he won the 1946 U.S. Amateur. He defeated Smiley Quick on the 37th hole of a 36-hole final match at Baltusrol Golf Club. Now I can see, you cannot, but I can see many of you are kind of chuckling because if you've played golf with my dad, that winning the U.S. Amateur is something that he might only dream about. But in all seriousness, I know that being a great player is one thing that he secretly wishes for and wishes that he was the player that Chris Smith is, and really don't we all for that matter. Some other things I saw while on Google were people talking about him being hard-nosed, jockey wonk, I don't even know what that is, a maverick, a rebel, just to name a few. And I feel like some of his critics have made him out to be like, I have a son, so Gru on Despicable Me, or Shrek, or The Wizard of Oz. They've portrayed him to be this guy that's evil and scary, intimidating. But what I see that all these characters have in common with my dad is that they're all people that have big hearts, and they just like to keep it protected. When I think of my dad, I think of him being a fan. Whether it's football, baseball, watching my sister or I play golf, or now my kids, he is the true sports enthusiast. I think of him as an all-American guy, a guy who loves hot dogs. Just ask anyone in my family about the hot dog tasting debates that we have. Popcorn, brownies, pizza, a guy who loves to go to the movies, who tirelessly goes to work every day, never complains about the job, but is always working hard to think of new ways to increase revenues. A guy who can take a major beating and still get up the next morning and encourage our family to make good choices and to not get dragged down in the details. A guy who loves his grandkids, who would do anything for their attention. A guy who sat with me many nights when we moved and told me that I would make friends, I just needed to continue to be myself. A guy who encouraged my sister and I no matter how badly we played or through every swing change. A guy who constantly reminded me that Kansas really was not that far from Indiana, and that despite what I thought, there was no culture difference. A guy who allows me to make mistakes at work, teaches me the business even though I have not chosen the PGA path. A guy who loves JFK, history, and truly wants to do the right thing. He constantly teaches me to stand up for what I believe in, and that hard choices and stances reap greater rewards. He's taught me to do my homework. People may not agree with the things that he does, but they respect you more if the decisions that you make are based off of research and not opinion. He teaches my family that it's important to lead, but it's also important to accept responsibility when we make mistakes. He's always open to learning more, not afraid to change his mind if someone shows him another way. And most importantly, he's taught us to work hard and never expect to receive things without working for them. The ride that my dad's on right now Many people think it's a life of leisure, traveling all the time, going to places that many of us dream of. But I know my dad well enough to know that even though he appreciates those things while he's on the road, he's constantly thinking about the work that he should be doing at home. I know that he doesn't look at this PGA position as traveling and fun, but a way to truly make a difference, and he wants to give back to the game of golf. Golf has provided everyone in our family with lots of opportunities, and we all want to give back. Our family appreciates what an honor being inducted into the Indiana Golf Hall of Fame is, and we don't take it lightly. We know that my dad is joining great company tonight, and that with this honor comes an obligation to continue to do great things for golf in Indiana. I think if you're close to this man, Ted Bishop, that I talk about, you know that he's a loyal friend, a great supporter, a prankster, but a good-spirited man who can see lots of perspectives and can see the big picture. Now, while growing up in our small Indiana town, we used to have to drive hours to anywhere that we would go. And like many of you, I did not have the same taste in music as my father. To put in perspective, we'd have to drive 2 to 3 hours just to visit our grandparents. My dad's favorite musician was Frank Sinatra. I would bet that he owned every CD or book that was available, probably still does. At the time, I dreaded these long drives, but now I think, was this another one of those big picture things? Did he know that some of those songs might someday narrate our lives? As an example, New York, New York. Did he know that my sister would move to New York? Or that Pete, being a native of New York, would someday be the next CEO of the PGA of America? Maybe not. But I think at the end of my dad's PGA presidency journey, this Sinatra song really says it. And now the end is here, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I say it clear, I state my case of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and I saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and much more than this, I did it my way. And yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I bit off more than I could chew. I did know that. But through it all, when there was a doubt, I ate it up and I spit it out. I faced it all, and I stood up tall, and I did it my way. I've loved and laughed and cried. I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now as tears subside, I find it all so amusing to think I did all that, and may I say not in a shy way. Oh, no, 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 I did it my way. For what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not. To say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took the blows, and I did it my way. The one thing I know for sure about my dad when his PGA travels are over is Sinatra said it first, the best is yet to come. It is my pleasure to introduce my dad, Ted Bishop.
Children.
Well, Gary Gant told me that I would cry. I just didn't know it would be before I had a chance to speak. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight, and I'd certainly like to thank the Hall of Fame Selection Committee. It's, as Chris said, and congratulations to Chris, it's a special honor. And, for me to be inducted into the Indiana Golf Hall of Fame with Chris Smith is really special. His brother Todd was the vice president of the Indiana section when I was a section president. And, I've long admired the Smith family, and I would definitely classify them as true royalty in the Indiana golf annals when it comes to their accomplishments as players, but as people as well. And, I can't sing their praises enough. I would also like to thank Mike David, and I would like to acknowledge everybody at the Indiana Golf Office for the great work that they do day in and day out. As you all know, I'm very privileged to have the golf office and the Indiana Golf Hall of Fame on site at the Legends, which makes this even more special. And I've had a great relationship with Mike over the years and everybody that's worked there, and thanks for that. I'd also like to recognize and say thanks to Jack Barber. Jack is retiring officially at the end of this year, 40 years here at Meridian Hills, and I've admired Jack in a lot of ways, and I, like many golf professionals here in Indiana, have looked at Jack Barber as a mentor. He's been phenomenal for the things that he's done for the section, for the state of Indiana, and certainly this club here. And he epitomizes what a golf professional would be, and I really want to take the public opportunity to say that. When you compare Chris Smith and myself and our careers in golf, we have very little in common. It's not quite that bad, but but the one thing that we do have in common is both of us grew up in small towns in northern Indiana, and actually not too far from each other. Chris grew up in Rochester, and I grew up in Logansport. And Chris and his family eventually moved to Peru, and anybody that knows anything about northern Indiana knows that there's no rival that the Logansport Berries despise any more than the Peru Tigers. And part of my childhood and really my athletic career was really defined by a lot of those great battles that took place between those two towns. But whereas Chris Smith had this legacy of players in his family, and he had all this guidance and all this incentive to play the game, I actually got my start in golf by playing at Tower Park in Logansport. And there was a hardware store that was about 4 blocks from my house, and I was mowing yards as a teenager, and I saved enough money up that I could go down and I could buy a George Fazio 7-iron, and I could buy a sleeve of Crowflight golf balls. And this public park was about 3 blocks from my house, and the primary thing that we did over there was play baseball and basketball. But I had a few buddies, and in between those basketball and baseball games, we would go to Tower Park, and we actually devised a golf course that was from lamppost to lamppost. And that was my first experience in golf. And I remember, as a kid growing up, I kind of enjoyed watching golf on TV. And the one thing that I remember watching the most and maybe enjoying the most was the old CBS Golf Classic, which was a Saturday afternoon, made-for-TV, taped telecast, at the Firestone Country Club in Akron, Ohio. And I don't know why. I just, even though I didn't play and my dad didn't play, there was something about that show that I enjoyed. But, quite honestly, as a kid whose father did not play, growing up in Logansport, baseball and basketball were my 2 primary sports. And, I was one of these athletes that was, I wasn't a star on any team that I played on, but I had the distinction of being a 3-sport letterman in high school. In Logansport, you had to play a fall sport to play basketball, and my freshman year, I ran cross country, and I just never enjoyed running that much, so I became a tennis player my sophomore year, and by the time I was a junior, I was the number 2 man on the tennis team. In basketball, I had set every free throw record that the high school had. I've still got a record, the single game free throw record that stands. I threw a no-hitter in baseball in front of 8 major league scouts who were looking at a couple of other guys on the team, and I found out that there was really no demand at that level for a pitcher that had good command and a 70-mile-an-hour fastball. So when I knew that baseball was not in my future. But what happened to me in golf, it happened in the summer of 1970. And, my dad came home from the barbershop one day, and my dad and grandfather were barbers. They were legendary barbers in Logansport. They owned the same barbershop, Bishop's Barbershop, in the same location. Opened it up in 1935, And my dad retired in 1995, gave my sister Susan, who's here tonight, and myself everything that we ever needed as kids. And you know, the barbershop was a great place to hang out, and I learned a lot about life, you know, being down there. But he came home one day and he said, "You got to get a real job." He said, "You're not making enough money mowing yards. You got to make some money. You're getting ready to go to college in another year or so." So I got a job working at the Rolling Hills Par 3 golf course on the east side of Logansport. And you know, I worked there the entire summer and never played golf because I was playing American Legion baseball. We had an unorganized basketball league in the summer, and you know, that was kind of my introduction to golf. And you know, the guy that I worked for at Rolling Hills, you know, would be, you know, if I had to name, you know, 2 or 3 people that were really instrumental in my career, you know, he was one of the guys. And his name was Dick Herr. And Dick was a pro superintendent, and he ran this 18-hole par 3 course. And you know, I worked there for 5 summers, and one of the winters after I got done working there, Dick had gone down to Florida, and he had gotten a part-time job working at Jupiter Hills. And he was out there one day, and George Fazio came up to him, ironically, the same George Fazio 7-iron that I had, and you know, gave Dick the shut-off motion on the mower and said, "You're going to be my next golf course superintendent here at Jupiter Hills." Now, this is the guy who's the superintendent at the Rolling Hills Par 3 golf course in Logansport, Indiana. And Dick looked at George and he said, "Well, what makes you think that I want to be your superintendent? You're firing these guys left and right." And George said, "You know what? You and I think alike, and this will work out great." So sure enough, Dick sent his wife back home and he packed his bags, and you know, he wound up going to Jupiter Hills. He was there for 12 years. He was there when Billy Mayfair won the U.S. Amateur Championship. And you know, I've thought back many times to those summers of 1970 to 75 when Dick and I were both working at the Rolling Hills golf course, this little par 3 course in northern Indiana, and I thought, how many people would have ever believed that he would be the golf course superintendent at Jupiter Hills and that I someday would be the president of the PGA of America? A pretty unlikely story. And you know, I went to Purdue. You know, I was going to major in radio and TV and journalism. I changed my major in my sophomore year due to Dick's encouragement, and I decided that I would major in agronomy and turf management. So, you know, I got out of school. My dad had me on the 4-year plan. I had no electives after my freshman year. And you know, I interviewed for a job in Linton, Indiana. It was an 18-hole municipal golf course. They had a PGA member who had been there for 35 years. He retired. And when they advertised a job with the Indiana PGA, there was not one Indiana PGA member that wanted this job. So they went to Purdue, and they thought they would hire a turf student to you know, go down there and be the pro superintendent. So I went down. I was engaged to Cindy at the time, and you know, looked at the golf course, and you know, I thought, you know, this is not what I went to college for. I want to be a golf course superintendent. I don't know anything about the business acumen that you need to have in order to be a golf pro, which is what I had to do to make my money. And I was going to own the carts, I was going to own the shop, and I was going to own the concessions. They were going to pay me a salary as pro superintendent, and they were going to give me a house to live in. And you know, the pro at the municipal golf course in my hometown, Dyckman Park Golf Club, which I'm sure you guys have played many times, his name was Frank Henry. And Frank had heard through my dad that I turned this job down, and Frank called me in my college dormitory room one night at Purdue, and he said, "You know, I heard you turn this job down." He said, "Well, you know, why did you turn the job down?" And I said, "Well, you know, I think I want to be a golf course superintendent. That's what I went to college to do." And he said, "You know what?" He said, "You've got the skill that they really need." And he said, "You can learn the business acumen, and I think you need to think that thing over again and take the job." Well, when I said I owned the carts, I was leasing 10 three-wheel Harley-Davidson gas carts because they had 60-some private carts. They were selling Coca-Cola in returnable glass bottles because they had a Coke bottling plant in Linton. And the golf shop was about as big as this stage. So I think I borrowed $2,000 from my grandfather and inventoried the shop. They paid me $6,500 salary. My wife and I lived in a house that probably had, I don't know, 1,200 square feet in it. And they said, "You know, if you come down here and you work really hard, you'll make $17,000 your first year." Well, that was in 1976. And, you know, that wasn't a bad living. That was about what a school teacher would make at that point in time. And when I took that job, I never really figured I would be there for more than 2 or 3 years. And as it turned out, I was there 17 years until I had the opportunity to come to Franklin and do the Legends. And honestly, I learned more about golf. That's where my career was really shaped. And it forged where everything else would go for me. And I had an opportunity to meet Phil Harris, the great entertainer and sports personality. And you know, we formed this celebrity golf tournament in Linton in Phil's name. And you know, it got to the point where we were playing 600 players over 2 days. We had 450 player shotgun starts. And we had this phenomenal celebrity field that would come. And these were people